Everyone has told you the same thing your entire life. Renting is throwing money away. You need to buy a house. But here's a question almost nobody asks. Is that actually true? Let's run the real math, because the answer might completely change how you think about this. Here's what most people don't calculate when they say, buying is always better. Property taxes average $6,000 a year. Maintenance costs average $5,000 a year. Insurance, closing costs, and mortgage interest can add hundreds of thousands more over the life of a loan. Suddenly, that $2,000 mortgage payment isn't the whole story. Most people assume renting is automatically a financial mistake and buying is automatically the smart move. But when you actually run the numbers, including opportunity cost, taxes, maintenance, and what renters could be doing with their extra cash, the answer is far more nuanced than the advice you've been given. By the end of this video, you'll understand the real hidden costs of both owning and renting. A simple rule of thumb that lets you compare the two in about 30 seconds, and exactly when each option actually makes more financial sense for your specific situation. Here's the core truth I want you to walk away with today. The decision to rent or buy shouldn't be an emotional one dressed up as a financial one. It should be a mathematical decision that happens to also factor in your lifestyle. Let's separate the emotion from the math, starting right now. When people compare a mortgage payment to rent, they usually only look at the principal and interest portion, but a realistic monthly housing cost also includes property taxes, homeowner's insurance, and a maintenance reserve. All combined, your true monthly cost is often 20 to 30% higher than just your mortgage payment alone. A common rule of thumb among real estate professionals is that you should budget about 1% of your home's value every year for maintenance. On a $400,000 home, that's $4,000 annually, or over $120,000 across 30 years. Roofs, HVAC systems, water heaters, and appliances don't last forever, and repairs are never optional. Here's something people forget. Property taxes never go away. Even after your mortgage is fully paid off, you could own your home outright with zero debt, and you'll still owe several $1,000s a year to your local government, forever, for as long as you own that property. Before you even move in, closing costs typically run 3 to 5% of the home's purchase price. On a $400,000 home, that's $12,000 to $20,000 in fees. Loan origination, appraisal, title insurance, attorney fees, inspections, all due upfront, on top of your down payment. Here's a number that shocks most people. On a $400,000 mortgage at a 7% interest rate over 30 years, you will pay over $550,000 in interest alone, more than the original loan amount. Your $400,000 house effectively costs you nearly $1 million by the time it's paid off. Even when you eventually sell, you don't keep the full sale price. Realtor commissions typically run around 6%. On a $500,000 sale, that's $30,000 gone immediately, plus additional closing costs on the seller's side. Buying and selling a home has real transaction costs on both ends. Here's the concept most people completely miss: opportunity cost. That $80,000 down payment could instead be invested in the stock market. Home values historically appreciate around 3 to 4% annually, while the S&P 500 averages around 10%. Over 20 years, that difference in growth rates is substantial. When you add everything together, mortgage interest, property tax, maintenance, insurance, and transaction costs, a $400,000 home can realistically cost over $1.2 million across a 30-year ownership period. This is the real number that almost never gets mentioned in the renting is wasting money conversation. To be fair, buying isn't all downside. Every mortgage payment builds equity, ownership stake in an asset that usually appreciates over time. This is genuinely valuable and is the strongest argument in favor of buying. But equity growth needs to be weighed against everything else we just covered, not viewed in isolation. There's also a psychological benefit to owning. A mortgage payment forces you to build wealth automatically, whether you feel like it or not. Renters have to make an active choice to invest their savings difference, and not everyone actually follows through on that discipline. This matters more than people think. Quick recap on owning. The true cost includes far more than the mortgage payment. Taxes, maintenance, insurance, and interest add up significantly. Selling has real transaction costs too, but equity, building, and forced savings are genuine, real benefits. Now let's look at the other side. The hidden costs of renting. Let's be fair to the other side too. Renting has real downsides. The most obvious one: every dollar of rent goes to your landlord and builds zero equity for you. Unlike a mortgage payment, none of it comes back to you in any form of ownership. Renting's hidden cost number 2. Rent increases every year, often by 3 to 8% depending on your market. A fixed-rate mortgage, by contrast, stays exactly the same for 30 years. Your rent could realistically double within 10 to 15 years, while a homeowner's payment stays completely fixed. Renting's hidden cost number 3. You don't control your own housing situation. A landlord can choose not to renew your lease, sell the property, or raise rent beyond what you can afford, forcing an unwanted move. Homeowners don't face this particular risk as long as they keep up with their mortgage. Renting also comes with its own upfront costs. Security deposits, typically equal to 1 or 2 months' rent, application fees, pet fees, and move-in fees. While smaller than a home's closing costs, these expenses are real and often required every time you move to a new rental. Here's the single most important concept in this entire debate. If renting costs less than owning each month, and you actually invest that difference rather than spending it, renting can genuinely outperform buying financially. This is the variable that determines everything, and it's completely in your control. This brings us to the single most useful tool for this entire decision, the 5% rule, popularized by financial analysts including Ben Felix. Take your home's value, multiply by 5%, divide by 12. That gives you the true monthly cost of owning, including maintenance, taxes, and the opportunity cost of the money tied up in your down payment. Let's walk through a real example. A $400,000 home. Multiply by 5%, that's $20,000 per year, divide by 12 months, that's approximately $1,667 per month. This is the true, all-in cost of owning that home, not just the mortgage payment, but everything combined. Now here's how you use this. Compare that $1,667 true cost of owning to the rent for a comparable home. If rent is $1,900 a month, buying is actually the better deal in this scenario. If rent were instead $1,400 a month, renting would be the smarter financial choice. This simple comparison cuts through all the noise. Why does this rule work so well? Because it captures the real economic costs that a simple mortgage payment comparison misses entirely. Realistic long-term maintenance costs, average property taxes, and the opportunity cost of the capital tied up in your down payment versus what it could earn if invested elsewhere instead. The 5% isn't a fixed universal law, it's a helpful average. If you live in a high property tax state like New Jersey or Texas, you might use 5.5 to 6% instead. If you're in a lower tax state, or you expect unusually fast home appreciation in your specific market, you might adjust down to 4 to 4.5%. Here's the critical condition that makes or breaks this entire strategy. Renting only wins financially if you actually take the money you save compared to owning and invest it consistently every single month. If you just spend that savings difference on lifestyle upgrades, renting loses every single time. The math only works with discipline. When you run a realistic 30-year simulation, accounting for home appreciation on one side and disciplined investing on the other, the results are often surprisingly close. In many markets, the disciplined renter investor can actually end up slightly ahead of the homeowner, purely from the power of stock market returns. This is exactly why there's no universal answer. In extremely high-cost markets like San Francisco or New York, home prices are so inflated relative to rent that renting often wins clearly. In more affordable markets across the Midwest or South, where home prices are more reasonable relative to rent, buying often makes more sense. Another quick tool: the price-to-rent ratio. Divide your home's purchase price by the annual rent for a comparable property. Below 15, buying is usually the better deal. Between 15 and 20, it depends on the specifics. Above 20, renting is usually the smarter financial choice. This gives you a fast gut check for any market. One factor that changes everything: how long you plan to stay. If you might move within 2 to 3 years, the upfront closing costs and selling costs often mean you'd lose money even in a normal market. Buying generally only makes sense if you're reasonably confident you'll stay in that home for at least 5, and ideally 7 to 10 years. Beyond the pure math, your personal financial stability matters enormously. Before considering buying, you should ideally have a solid emergency fund of 3 to 6 months of expenses, stable income, a reasonable down payment saved, and a healthy debt-to-income ratio. Buying a home you can't comfortably afford defeats the entire purpose of building wealth. Let's also acknowledge the honest truth: this isn't purely a math decision for most people. Stability for your family, the freedom to renovate and personalize your space, versus the flexibility to relocate for career opportunities, or simply not wanting the responsibility of maintenance. These lifestyle factors matter and are completely valid parts of this decision. Quick recap: the 5% rule reveals the true cost of owning beyond just the mortgage. Renting only wins financially if you actually invest the savings difference. Markets vary dramatically, so check your local price-to-rent ratio, and how long you plan to stay matters enormously. 5 or more years generally favors buying. So, how do you actually decide for your specific situation? Let's build a simple decision framework you can apply right now, based on everything we just covered. Buying clearly wins when several conditions align. You plan to stay in the area for 7 or more years. The price-to-rent ratio in your market is below 15. You have stable income and a solid emergency fund. You're comfortable handling maintenance responsibilities, and your local market has historically reasonable home prices relative to income. Renting clearly wins when you're uncertain how long you'll stay in an area. Your local price-to-rent ratio is above 20. Your career might require relocation. You value flexibility over long-term stability. And, critically, you're genuinely committed to investing the money you save compared to owning. Honestly, most people fall somewhere in the gray area where the math is genuinely close either way, and that's okay. When the numbers are close, it's completely reasonable to let lifestyle preferences be the deciding factor, because you're not sacrificing significant wealth either direction. Here's your homework. Literally, take a home price you're considering, multiply by 5%, divide by 12. Compare that number directly to comparable rent in the same area. This simple calculation takes less than a minute and gives you a genuinely useful starting point for your decision. And don't forget, this decision isn't purely mathematical. If owning a home brings you genuine peace of mind, stability for your family, or freedom to make a space truly yours, that value matters too. Even if the pure numbers slightly favor renting, personal finance is still personal. Your action plan: Step 1. Calculate the 5% rule for a home you're actually considering. Step 2. Compare that to real comparable rent in your area. Step 3. If renting comes out ahead, make sure you actually invest that difference every single month. The math only works if you follow through. This week's specific action: run the 5% rule on your actual current situation, whether you're currently renting or considering buying. It takes less than 2 minutes and gives you real clarity instead of relying on generic advice from well-meaning family members. The best financial decision you can make here isn't always buy or always rent. It's the one based on your actual numbers, your actual market, and your actual life circumstances. Generic advice from social media or well-meaning relatives can't account for your specific situation. Your calculator can. There is no universally right answer between renting and buying. There's only the right answer for your specific numbers, your specific timeline, and your specific life. Now you have the tools to actually figure that out for yourself. Thank you for taking the time to actually understand the real math behind one of the biggest financial decisions most people will ever make. This alone could save or make you hundreds of thousands of dollars over your lifetime. If this video gave you real clarity on the rent versus buy debate, hit like and subscribe. I break down exactly how money actually works every single week. Completely free, no jargon, no sales pitch. Coming up next, why Warren Buffett specifically recommends index funds over almost every other investment strategy and what his personal portfolio actually looks like. It's a perfect follow-up to today's video. Bonus fact to close things out. The average American moves about 11.7 times in their lifetime. Every single one of those moves, if you owned instead of rented, comes with real transaction costs. This is exactly why your expected time horizon matters so much in this decision. A few more quick facts. The median U.S. home price in 2026 sits around $420,000. Average 30-year mortgage rates are hovering between 6.5% and 7%. The average age of first-time homebuyers has risen to 38, up from 29 back in 1981. And renters now actually outnumber owners in several major U.S. cities. It's worth acknowledging honestly, homeownership has become genuinely more difficult for younger generations. In the 1980s, a typical home cost about 3 times the average annual income. Today, it's often 7 times or more. This context matters when older generations offer buying advice based on their very different experience. At the end of the day, the loudest voices in this debate are often the least helpful ones. Your uncle, who bought in 1995, your friend who rents by choice, the internet influencer with a strong opinion. None of them have run your specific numbers. Now you can. The most common comment I expect from this video, but what about pride of ownership? That's completely valid, and I'm not dismissing it. Just be honest with yourself about whether that emotional value is worth potentially tens of thousands of dollars in reduced long-term wealth, or whether it's worth exactly what you're paying for it. The real takeaway from today isn't buy or rent. It's this: know your actual numbers first, then choose the life that fits you best. That's the only formula that actually works for every single person watching this video. Today's entire video in 3 sentences. 1. Owning has hidden costs beyond the mortgage payment, including taxes, maintenance, and interest. 2. The 5% rule reveals the true monthly cost of owning any home. 3. Renting only wins financially if you actually invest the savings difference every month. Remember this: math doesn't care about your emotions, your family's opinions, or what your friends are doing. Use it anyway. It's the most honest advisor you'll ever have. Quick question for the community: are you currently renting or buying? And what did the 5% rule tell you when you ran your own numbers? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one, and I'll reply to the most interesting situations. Final recap. 1. The true cost of owning includes taxes, maintenance, and interest beyond the mortgage. 2. The 5% rule reveals your real monthly cost of owning. 3. Renting only wins if you actually invest the difference. 4. Markets vary, so check your price to rent ratio. 5. Time horizon and lifestyle both matter alongside the math. One final thought before you go. This isn't about winning an argument with your relatives at Thanksgiving dinner. It's about making the financial decision that's genuinely right for your wealth, your timeline, and your life. Now you have the tools to actually know. I'm Jax, and I'll see you next week for why Warren Buffett recommends index funds. Until then, run your numbers before you run to a real estate agent.